Hello everyone, this is the finale of What If Deku Was the Chainsaw Man, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. His glasses are fogging. He takes them off and cleans the lenses with a pinch of his shirt's hemming. That's the fourth time that he's been blinded. He figures it must have something to do with the cleansers and humidifiers stirring air in an effort to keep it sanitary. Such is a hospital. It's been a while since he last visited one. He had wished he'd never have to again. Then he saw the news reports. In the midst of All Might's final battle, a reason not to go anywhere near a hospital, along with the perfect reason. His classmates in critical condition. Then Midoriya. Ida has to rub his eyes before putting the bifocals back on, unable to see clearly with or without the glasses otherwise. Ending his hero journey had been something that the boy wrestled with ever since making such a huge decision. Now that UA has been attacked yet again and shut down with such severity, he realizes it never quite mattered at all. Like his brother, heroes are killed every day in the line of duty. He'd have marched right into his coffin along with the rest had he not been so lucky. He only hopes now that the rest can be spared. He may not be class rep anymore, but he still feels a responsibility to be there for them and guide them properly. Tenure Ida, he hears his name called and stands. If you'll follow me, Ida nods when being waved over. There's quite a long list of names he gave the staff for who he'd like to visit that he doesn't really know who he'll be seeing first, but there's still a feeling of anticipation within him. The walk down the hallway to the patient rooms is oddly quiet. He doesn't know why he had been expecting doctors and nurses to be running left and right. It just seemed to him like more of a hectic time than a calm one. Then again, it also feels suitable as a period of mourning. While All Might didn't die in his final fight, it's still the end of an era. Along with the abrupt halt of the next generation through UA. Hero society in general is on the verge of collapse. It's quiet, the calm before the storm. Ida fears the storm. Here we are, Ida is brought to the first of many rooms. When he peers through the doorway, he's shocked to see Ojiro in a hospital bed. The blonde boy is wrapped in bandages below the waist. It takes Ida a second to realize why. His eyes widen behind his glasses. Are you? Ida swallows his words before he can choke on them. Of course Ojiro isn't okay. But what else is there to say or ask? Hey Ida, Ojiro attempts a smile. Despite his efforts, it doesn't work. Looks like you got out just in time, eh? And his attempt at humor is just as weak and flimsy. It's not so bad. Ida clears his throat before clarifying, I mean, not pursuing hero work that is. Ojiro scoffs, unconvinced. He glances down at the space between his legs and then cranes his neck to peer over the brim of his bed. At least you get to keep your calf engines. Ida feels himself physically flinch at the bitter bite of his former classmate's words. I can't imagine what it's like to lose a part of yourself like you did. I'm sorry. He moves to take a seat but Ojiro holds up a hand to stop him. I just wanted to. I need some time alone. Ojiro turns his head to avoid making eye contact. Ida nods anyways, not sure of what more to say before he gives his old friend the space that's been requested. As Ida heads to the next room, he can't help but regret coming to the hospital. If Ojiro losing his tail is the lesser of the evil that transpired, then he's not sure he can handle what's to come. And what comes is awful. He sees Ashido next. The girl has dark rings under her dark sclera. She tells him about the nightmares that kept her up. Aoyama's betrayal and Koda's death. It's enough to ward him away. He's unable to visit any of the others after that. Sorry Midoriya. Ida apologizes silently as he leaves the hospital and his past life behind completely. Makima opens her eyes. The yellow shading within them matches the ceiling light that she gazes up at. Each lens flare loops around and spirals into the rings that lead to her two sets of iris. She stares straight into the light, unwavering. But eventually, Makima does blink. And she sits up in her hospital bed. She sees the IV hooked into her left arm and then the handcuffs hooking her right to the bed's bar barrier. Even if it weren't for the television in the corner of the room recapping everything that happened at Kamino, it's quite evident how she got revived and brought here. The red-haired woman smiles, a breath escaping through her parsed lips in some semblance of a soft sigh. If she survived, then so must had Izuku Midoriya, but more importantly, what she witnessed battling all for one. And now with both Afo and All Might out of the way, she can proceed without much of a deterrent. Not even from Nezu now that UA is being shut down. Yes, the commission closing is a setback, as is the warrant for her arrest. But that's something she can handle. Makima leans back into the cushioning of her bed, and waits for the calm to pass. Side by side, nobody would be able to tell the difference. They were never identical twins, but now, Shoto and Tuya Todoroki are covered head to toe in burns so damaging that they've been kept unconscious from all the pain suppressants being pumped into them. The medically induced coma is all that's keeping them alive. NG wonders if it's selfish to wish that they never wake up at all. If they could be spared of pain from henceforward, he'd number. That's not the reason he wants them to stay out of commission. The truth is that he's scared. Scared of facing them. Of facing the world and being ridiculed. Because he knows deep down that he's the reason that they're both this way. And so do his other offspring. Natsuo and Fuyumi made sure to visit during the hours that he didn't. They blame him justifiably for all of this. NG plunges his face into his hands, falling into that despair that he feels so deserving of. Kirishima sits at the foot of Bakugo's bed, watching his friend sleep. The usually live firecracker is sleeping off his meds. Broken bones and bruises will do that to a person. Kirishima had tried assuring Bakugo that the injuries made him appear all the manlier, but that sentiment had been kinda lost. Especially when I met your parents Bakubro. Kirishima recalls the way his friend's mom and dad sobbed over the way their son looked. His face had been beaten in so badly it was hardly recognizable to them. They seemed nice, but truthfully it was a weirdly sobering situation to be put in. This had all become so very real to him. It wasn't any longer about appearing manly or charismatic. It was simply about survival. You gotta pull through and survive this with me, man. Kirishima holds back tears as he tries to recognize the face under the bruises that the boy's parents couldn't find. She can't feel her arm. Or, rather, anything below the tight clench of her upper bicep. When Kyoko reaches over to tenderly touch the area with her other arm, she feels the fabric of hospital bed sheets instead of flesh. The girl's face scrunches up with confusion until she turns her head to inspect it with her eyes. Oh. She sees that she's missing a limb. It all makes sense now. Or maybe it doesn't. None of this chaos makes sense to her anymore. She chokes on a sob of a laugh, the sound some sort of chortle. It's weird. The disconnect of her arm and the disconnect of her mind to the situation currently. It all happened so fast and there's no time to process any of it. There's no time for anything worthwhile at all. She sees her songbook on the nightstand beside her, probably left by her parents. It always helps to write her thoughts down in some form of lyrics. Except, that's not much of an escape now either. The pages are stained red from blood, the paper crusted and crinkled. It's hard to see through the stains and near impossible to read what is written. It's even harder when her eyes are blurred by tears. Kyoko cries. She cries hard. Despite not having a heightened hearing quirk like her, Izuku Midoriya hears her. Because he's standing right outside her room's door. He had come to check on her and have a true reunion. Except, with his hand paused mid-knocking motion, he now thinks better of himself. He lowers the hand that's shaped in the form of a fist. Now is much too soon. She's not ready. And quite frankly, he doesn't know if he is either yet. Izuku walks away, leaving Kyoko to cry alone. Izuku's eyes lay flattened, as much so as his form under the hospital bed's thin sheets. Well, they flick left and right despite having a glazed over look, if it isn't my two favorite people, sitting opposite of the boy are Makima and Nezu, the two visitors at a seated height level. Nezu's small maw of a mouth morphs into something of a smile. I may not be entirely human, Midoriya, but I do understand sarcasm. The quirky creature straightens itself as it speaks. Izuku blinks slowly before replying, I can understand and, somewhat, tolerate. He blinks again to hide the quick glance that he throws Makima's way, but I still can't help but wonder why you're allowed in here. I thought UA was done for. Quite the frank way of putting it, and you were moved to the care of Miss Makima here regardless of the institution continuing teaching practitioner or not. Nezu nods along before ceasing the head bobbing with a clap of his paws, but you're on the right track that those are not the reasons why I am here. A beat of silence follows before the retired principal adds, either of us, along with a gesture towards Makima. Yeah. Izuku holds his gaze on the red-haired woman who operated as his boss and caretaker for a time. You're uncharacteristically quiet for all of this. Like UA, the HPSC is undergoing a change in management. Nezu speaks for her and regains the boy's attention with that explanation. Makima's being here is not in regards to your heroics career either. His eyebrows raise as though to curl into question marks without the dotting. Okay, I'll bite. And he swallows as though to chew if he were to, then what's this all about? Where to begin? Nezu keeps his paws clasped together whilst he muses. Makima's voice pierces the room so suddenly that Izuku and Nezu jump a little. Let's lay all our cards on the table. Nezu recovers quick enough. She finally speaks, trying not to show that he had been startled. That's probably not a good thing. Izuku still feels a sense of unease but decides to piggyback on the former principal's light-hearted effort at releasing that tension. You can decide that after you hear us out. Nezu's semblance of a smile shakes and wavers as he gets serious. I know I said this isn't pertaining to your teachings, but how about a final lesson for old time's sake? Is there anything even left to learn? From what I've been seeing and hearing, hero work is going down the drain. Izuku shifts uncomfortably to sit up straighter in his bed. The subject matter is more so to do with history. Makima chimes in again. She side-eyes Nezu, though there is a hero involved. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Nezu holds up a paw as though to silence her. And yet, she continues talking. Midoriya, what do you know about the origin of quirks? Izuku glances between the two as he hesitantly answers, the same as everyone else. The luminescent baby was the first human to gain a quirk. Nezu drops all but one digit on his paw to emphasize the point of his interjection, however. Izuku catches on. Oh, you're talking about the quirk theories about animals being what passed those genes onto us, animals having quirks first. You're on the right path, but there's a reason why not every animal had a quirk. Nezu keeps indicating what he's saying with his singular digit poised. And not every human. Makima's interjection makes Izuku look away from the mammal. He feels as though that was directed at him particularly, but for her to know he was born quirkless is something she shouldn't be aware of. Devils, otherwise known as monsters, have been known to roam the earth for centuries. Nezu's return to formula gets him off that train of thought and back on track. When he goes back to listening, they could take a variety of form and interact with the like of humans, which led to deals being struck and contracts being made, except that what he hears is mind-boggling and full of assumptions just the same. Wait. Izuku thinks about Pokita and his promise to his pet when he was granted a quirk. Yes, Midoriya, your dear friend is a devil too. Nezu must see something in the boy's expressions since he clarifies that thought with a confirmation. And you forged a contract with him to have a quirk, just like everybody else with their own inherited devils. Makima adds to that confirmation. Yours in particular though, Nezu motions to the scar crossing over one of his eyes, was quite rebellious. Izuku almost flinches at that. The implications and the timeline of what could have transpired in the past makes him reconsider everything. Before he can ask anything, the two keep spilling more exposition. We have our own motives, Makima gestures to herself, I to bring him out. And I to keep him restrained. Nezu gives the woman a glare with his beady black eyes. It's just a matter of making or breaking the contract, but Makima remains passive and coolly collected as she folds her hands in her lap. Yes, Nezu grinds through his teeth before returning his focus to Izuku, although a major shift in what we believed possible transpired when All for One forced the contract to become null and void for a while. I'm not sure I'm following. Izuku feels the string dangling from his sternum as he recalls blacking out during the Kamino Ward incident. The boy looks to Nezu's dark eyes for answers. He expects to find none in the blackness of the voided sockets, but they do begin to brighten into orange fiery glows, with rings of amber spiraling to their epicenter of depth and death. I'm sorry to have hidden this all from you, and as such, it must indeed be very confusing. There's no need to elaborate anyways. He recognizes that hellish gaze as Makima's and all 7 circles illuminating those eyes. You say that like we aren't at a stalemate. The casual conversation Nezu has with her now excludes Izuku completely. Watching and listening as a spectator, he can feel the heat rising in the room. I did say we'd be putting all our cards on the table. Makima's smile is whimsical as she tilts her head playfully to the side. It's like predator and prey when Nezu's response is a stilled stare. Then, there's a knock at the door. Izuku's head is the first to move, whipping towards it. Shall we answer that? Makima's voice is behind him. It moves closer. Towards the door. Past him. And towards the door. What have you done? Nezu's voice is a hushed whisper as he starts to stand. Hawks hasn't come to visit you because he's dead, but Makima ignores him in favor for talking to Izuku again. I killed him. Izuku nearly chokes on his gasp when hearing that. It's only worse when the cruelty of her joyful reveal carries onto a threat. Just like everyone else, I will take away from your life in pursuit of becoming a hero per your contract. Izuku shudders when Makima reaches for the door handle but keeps her gaze looking back at him. Just like your mother, the warmth is gone and his blood runs cold. Kyoka, his breath releases a cloud of condensation when he sees the girl come to visit him. She appears as scared as him. Izu. Bang, and then she's gone. Blood covers the room. Rays of light brush against the surface of his skin, as do the bed of leaves bristling beneath him. He squints under what must be the sun's bright glare above his eyes, grateful for the foliage of tree branches blotting that expanse of illumination out in patches. Izuku starts to stir, making an attempt to sit up and redirect his gaze. Something weighs him down. There's a pressure on his chest. The boy tilts his chin as he turns his head to see what it is. A small dog wearing a coat of orange fur. Pokita. The canine's name is but a wordless whisper as he gawks at it. I always loved listening to you talk about your dreams of becoming a hero. A voice as meek and cute as the animal appears overrides whatever Izuku wasn't capable of saying. I gave you my heart. The boy feels the dog's tiny tail slightly whipping his chest as it wags up and down, in exchange for you to show me those dreams. And he remembers. He remembers that promise and all that followed from this place. This is where they first met in the forest. This is where it started. The chainsaw on Pokita's head isn't running. It's stopped. Izuku feels that burnout within himself. After losing his mother, his mentor, and then Kyoka, he understands there is no real way of saving anyone with such a devastating power. Tears well up in his eyes until he can hardly see Pokita as anything more than a blur. The sun behind Pokita increases its glow and Izuku can't help but blink under its power. When his eyes reopen, he finds himself in a darker place. A void that he floats within rather than lays grounded on. There's an absence of warmth. An absence of Pokita. There's just a cold crusted contract in front of him. A piece of paper that's short of being in reach. That was our contract. The voice he heard earlier is even further at a distance than the doent. Now it is terminated. Izuku opens his mouth to call out to it, but, again, nothing comes out. Not even a scream. As the contract creases top to bottom, it starts folding over and creasing. It bends and separates until the contract rips apart, tearing itself in two halves. Chainsaws cleave through flesh and bone, tendons tearing until all that tissue is completely severed. Without rhyme or reason, portions of the carved body become butchered into dismembered fragmentations. Makima splits and comes apart in a variety of ways. The woman is slashed and torn through by the malformation of Chainsaw Man. And then, she is reshaped and put back together. At the cost of several hospital staff. Blood in exchange for blood. Lives ended to rejuvenate another. Makima controls the flow of the fight, blood puddles pooling while hers solidifies. This is the 12th time this has happened. No matter how many times Chainsaw Man cuts her down, the devilish woman simply steals life from whoever is around her to be revived. It's a fiendish tactic that a hero would surely fall victim to. But funnily enough, while that may have worked on the likes of Izuku Midoriya, the killing machine hunting a devil cares less about the consequential cost to win. Chainsaw Man steamrolls through her again, chopping and cutting all the way. Makima rebuilds herself. Civilians die before they can flee from the fiasco. The woman's hand reconjoins to mimic a handgun, the gesture gearing up for an attack. Chainsaw Man slices the limb at the wrist. Instantaneously, Makima heals her injury and keeps the base stem intact. She follows through with her counter to her opponent's consistent individualistic massacre by pulling the invisible trigger with her thumb. Bang! A sizable hole implodes from Chainsaw Man's pectoral region, as though he's just been struck by a cannonball. The various chainsaws protruding from the macabre of chainsaws rev at full throttle. Green blood couples with red spillage. Chainsaw Man regenerates just like Makima. For such a heavy-weighted fighter, the personification of Pokita moves faster than the character of Control. He moves into her space before she can retreat, dual-bladed subsets of limbs winding up and severing his target into pieces. Meat slabs slap the floor, wet squelches splashing blood up past the chainsaw creature's ankles. Intestines strew and stream behind Chainsaw Man, becoming entangled in him as he swims through the bloodshed like a fish into a net. When Makima's severed head bounces off the floor, it does so twice. Her crimson-colored hair blends with the puddle beneath her other dismembered parts. But her mouth remains intact. And so she speaks. "Come on out everyone," the command calls to hidden heroes around the premises. The likes of Endeavor, Centipede, and Selkie step out from patient rooms. Like NG had been visiting his sons, the sentimental Selkie had been visiting his intern. And apprehend Chainsaw Man, Makima orders everyone who hears her command to abandon their original purpose of presence and shifts their focus forcibly onto Chainsaw Man. Endeavor ignites like a flare on the forefront, flying forward as a hellish blaze. But Chainsaw Man has been to literal hell. Answer, the top-ranking hero is easy enough to parry. Of equal muscular mass, the chainsaw creature matches Endeavor better than any Nomu in sheer strength. Fire erupts and bursts a wide hole through the hospital, a direct detonation akin to that of a volcano. Chainsaw Man carries Endeavor through the firepower up and over. Then the two come back down and decimate the area of landing. Debris and destruction litters their brief battle and Endeavor gets cut down. Centipede slithers into the fray from behind, attempting a sneak attack. Chainsaw Man pauses, not out of shock but out of some sense of familiarity. But that moment of hesitation isn't enough for Centipede to come out on top. The bug is squashed. A smear of green paste is all that is left behind. The same pause happens for a second with Selkie. Then the Sea Hero's right hook gets caught in a chainsaw. The arm flies off, followed by the other. Sushi is served as the once mighty man is chopped apart. By this point, Makima has remade herself. At the cost of the lives Chainsaw Man took. She knew they wouldn't be able to beat him. Rather, they were as much a stalling tactic as they were a chance to revive herself. And an opportunity. It was an opportunity to test the limits of her control. And knowing now that it works, she opts for complete control with chain leashes to link herself to everyone within the hospital's vicinity. A fruitless attempt at leashing Pokita like a pup fails. Chainsaw Man bats the chain extension away with a chainsaw. Like Centipede, Bubble Girl is brought back by Makima to charge in and mingle with the others. Again, this is Makima's fatal mistake. What would have worked on Izuku Midoriya matters not to Chainsaw Man. Pokita's personification cares not for the blue-skinned girl. Bubble Girl is killed again. Sirius, having tagged along with Selkie to visit Tsuyu, is blown to bits by a simple swing of a chainsaw. The blades don't cut her, but rather the force of the wind carved apart. Also caught in the backlash are Tsuyu herself and the shortly resurrected Sir Naiteye. Hero of Hell, Makima smirks with satisfaction as she watches the massacre of her puppets. "You're not being very heroic right now, are you?" Considering being a hero was Izuku Midoriya's dream and not Pokita's, she again has misconstrued what matters to Chainsaw Man. Especially since that dream had been the signature of the contract of which she just tore apart. Chainsaw Man slashes at a group of controlled civilians. They're like zombies hobbling towards him. Lamb for the slaughter. Capable of being regenerated only to be mulled down again. Up here, Chainsaw Man veers his chainsaw-pointed skull towards the canary cry of Mirako. She descends with an outstretched leg, plotting to plant it down and kick him. Instead, the leg is torn free from the rest of her body. And her body is corkscrewed by a chainsaw. The rabbit heroine tries bouncing back with her remaining leg but Chainsaw Man finishes what he started by ripping her in half. A brotherly bond bound by Makima's controlling chains carries two hellish Todorokis down. The burned bodies animatedly move in sync, blue and orange flames flailing in a focused rush. Tuya, or otherwise known as Dabi, burns brightly when slamming into Chainsaw Man. He's followed by his brother, Shoto flash freezing his flames at the last second for a bigger impact. An explosion ensues. Only Chainsaw Man comes out of it. Makima flexes her fingers, the chains attached to each one careening. The remnants of Class 1A charge Chainsaw Man. Okako Uraraka floats into a frenzy of chainsaws. Ojiro jumps with an outstretched leg to compensate for the loss of his tail, but he loses that limb too. Toru Hagako's body when painted in red is no longer completely invisible. Kirishima's hardening cracks under the brutal blow of various chainsaws, and then so do his bones. Kaminari attacks with maximum voltage. It shocks Chainsaw Man momentarily. But then the electrical enemy of Pokita gets his power cut. Mina Ashido glides on a slick slide of acid, spraying some of the same burning chemical at Chainsaw Man. But the Pinkett isn't capable of melting the monster down. Instead, she's the one to get smushed. Sero swings in on a line of tape, simultaneously shooting a second strand from his other elbow. The binding lengths wrap around Chainsaw Man. But they aren't able to contain the creature for long. A flex of muscle and a lift of chainsaws both rips and cuts through the tape. Sero is stopped short, clotheslined by a chainsaw, his head flying clean off. Yaoyorozu tries throwing a spear through Chainsaw Man's stomach, but it doesn't do much. Pokita's power pulverizes the ponytailed girl. Tenya Ida, having not completely left the premises before this battle transpired, is also caught on a chain length. He dashes forwards and lands a kick on Chainsaw Man's chin. The hit amounts to the same minimal amount of damage that Yaoyorozu's spear did. And Ida joins his brother in the afterlife. A blast blows away walls of the hospital. Katsuki Bakugo, bruised but breathing, steps through the wafting smoke. He's got a chain running from his skull. Chainsaw Man tracks the links to Makima, the woman floating in the sky with the sun behind her as a false angel's halo. VRAAAHH, Chainsaw Man surges forward at the same time as Bakugo. Explosions carry across the building. Floors collapse and the two fighters come out the other side of the hospital. They spiral and somersault while clashing in an aerial battle. Chainsaws block explosions. It's followed by a heavy slam into the next building, the structure losing its standing and toppling over. Dark Shadow, Tokiyami assists Bakugo with an attack from the now darkened combat space as the site sinks. Shoji and Sato grab onto either side of Chainsaw Man, using their combined strength to hold him in place. The battleground collapses and becomes a tomb. Until Chainsaw Man digs himself free from the ground. Victoriously hoisting bloodied bodies on each chainsaw arm, Pokita's personification stands tall. Okay. Makima claps her hands together to give the performance a brief applause. This looks unwinnable, and then she turns to flee. But Chainsaw Man won't allow her to leave. He lashes out with a precision of refined control that Izuku Midoriya never had, tethered teeth coming loose from every bar and snapping out like whips to snare the woman. The barbed wires rope her back around and propel Makima into the rotating blades. She's chopped into bits once again. Blood dribbles out from the corners of Makima's mouth, the upturning of her lips encapsulating a crimson drool instead. Utilizing her ability of partial resurrection, she uses the sky as a battleground to her advantage. Feathers as red as the bloodshed swoop under her remains and carry her from any chainsaw's proximity. Hawks, hovering just out of reach from Chainsaw Man himself, calls upon more feathers to stab the creature with. Two feathers stretch and sharpen to be dual-wielding blades in his hands. The undead hero darts down, hacking and slashing with a swordsman's skill. Chainsaw Man counters despite the many feathers pinning his joints. The fight moves back to ground level. They crack the concrete beneath them and glide along, sharp edges skidding with every touchdown. Pebbles pelt them before more rock gets unearthed. Cars parked on street corners are torn through like paper, obstacles obstructing their battle. Makima tracks them all the while, finishing the reconstruction of her body as she does. Once finished with herself, she works on supporting Hawks with backup. Another bladed battler who had given Chainsaw Man trouble before, already a controllable corpse as a Nomu, jumps into the fray. Stain, now Katana Man, strikes at Pokita's personification with the intent to carve out the devil's heart. Chainsaw Man plunges his fists into the ground. A quake rumbles with the living engine. Stone slabs slip free from the floor, chain teeth grappling and propelling the ground loose and into chunks. No longer with a surface to stand on, Katana Man is diced mid-air. Hawks flaps his wings to fly back but gets them clipped before fully flying away. Izuku stares blankly at the blood splatter where Kyoko once stood. His mouth hangs open, something between vomit or screaming wanting to climb up and out of his throat, but staying dry. He's turning paler and paler the longer he stands there. It feels as though his heart has just been ripped out. Izuku looks down and, oh, it has. Izuku falls to his knees, no longer able to remain standing. And finally, something does come out of his mouth. A cross between coughing and spitting up blood. Whether it's from his fatal injury or the return of his inherited disease, he doesn't know. Nor does he care. He doesn't even know or care how much time he's got left before he completely passes away. I'll be seeing you soon. Mom. Kyoka. The boy's breathing is but a whisper drowned in blood. Maybe so, a squeaky voice makes his ear twitch. He tilts his head to see who's talking. But then again, perhaps, soon, is much too soon. Nezu approaches him. What do you want? Didn't you already take everything you could from me? Izuku sneers at the former principal of UA. It was never my intention to take anything from you, Midoriya, I swear by it. Nezu holds up his paws defensively. Rather, it's now that I hope to give you something. There's nothing from you that I want. Izuku shakes his head as much as he can with the gradually draining energy he has left in him. No. What about your first contract back? It is my job to bring up heroes, after all. Izuku's dead stare looks into the vacant voided eyes of Nezu. I can give you a way to defeat Makima. Chainsaw Man lays flat on the floor, defeated. Makima crouches over the husk of the former hulkish monster. The chainsaws have stopped running. Steam has willowed to puffs from the armored plating coating him. It was only inevitable that you two would become inferior to me. Makima reaches for the creature's chest. With a forceful tug, she grabs and pulls free the chainsaw's heart of fuel. Pokita, smaller than ever, pulsates as a beating heart in the palm of Makima's hand. The tiny maw on the pup uplifts into some semblance of a smile. Right as a blade stabs through Makima's chest. The heart had seen what was coming behind her. Which was Izuku Midoriya wielding Kyoka Jiru's katana. How? Makima chokes out a cough of blood as she voices her disbelief over being caught by surprise. You didn't think someone who's quirkless and inferior would be able to get the drop on you, huh? Izuku bites down on his anger with gritted teeth. Using that anger, he drags the katana with two hands gripping its handle. The blade severs and splits Makima down the middle. I'll be taking Pokita back now. Izuku, on the verge of dying without Pokita. And Pokita on the verge of perishing without him. They reunite, and give one another a reason to live again. Why can't I? Makima struggles to push herself up. She can't close or seal the fatal injury to her midsection like she had all the cuts from Chainsaw Man. Nezu told me your secret. Izuku plants a foot on her back and shoves her back down. To keep her pinned there, he leans on his knee to talk in her ear. You don't deem anyone worthy of having more power than you, that your infinite healing is limited only to beings capable of matching you. Notably, Chainsaw Man. You couldn't live with that, so you wanted to make Pokita weaker than you in order to become the strongest. Only All for One came as close, and with him gone, you thought this was your best chance. Only, you never knew Pokita like I did. You only knew me. Weak, quirkless, me. This is impossible. The rings within Makima's eyes expand as wide as her eyes as she stares at the blade coming for them. This is for my mom. Izuku swings the katana. This is for Kyoka. Izuku swings the katana. This is for Hawks. Izuku swings the katana. And this, Izuku drops the katana in favor for gripping the starter string that's returned to his chest. This one's for me and Pokita. Chainsaws were invented to birth. They wound up being used as tools of destruction and death. Makima is no more. Chainsaw Man lives on. Izuku Midoriya begins again. Strips of fluorescent light patterned by glowing waves are suspended above her. They're burning brightly enough that there is no flutter or flicker to them. Himiko's chrysoberyl eyes are undeterred and continue to stare anyway. She doesn't blink, not while the light doesn't wither. She just focuses on flexing her fingers and toes while she lays flat and sprawled as a starfish on a floor as pristinely white undisturbed snow. The hard tile won't move with her arms and legs if she tries making an angel pattern, but it is cold enough to create that wintry feeling nonetheless. She stays that way for some time. She isn't very certain for how long, but it doesn't seem to elapse longer than hours or shorter than minutes. That could just be because of the sheer emptiness in her head. The room is just as vacant as the thoughts that'd typically keep her company though, so it'd probably get boring if she were to become aware of the time. Himiko half expects snowflakes to start drifting from the heavenly glow above her. They would add to the white decor beneath her. The girl sticks out her tongue, hoping to catch a taste should one actually fall. The thought of tasting blood on the tip of her tongue again mingles in with her childish wonder. Memories of playing on a playground and getting a scraped knee are like a flashback hovering over her, buried behind the lights in the ceiling, susceptible should that light burn out and allow darkness to descend on her. She recalls exploring as a kid and coming across a bird on her adventure. She had bitten into it. Himiko's fanged teeth gnashed together, her mouth snapping shut. Having not gotten a taste of snow, or anything for that matter, her tongue drains dry. The girl sits up, crisscrossing her legs to fold over each other when she does. Her posture is as poor as her hair. The buns she'd usually tie them in are gone and now the blonde locks are a mess. It makes her appear as though she just rolled out of bed. Seeing someone familiar through the glass parian wall that serves as a barrier to enter or exit her cell wakes her up as though she did just get up. The thick shield divides Himiko from a boy on the other side. He's sitting in a plastic chair that doesn't look much comfier than the hard floor that she's on. Izuku, Himiko's pointed teeth make a return of exposure when she smiles broadly. The pearly whites blend with the spatial environment but the red hue on her cheeks do not. Though that may be in part to blame on her apparel. Prison uniforms classifying the degree of their security level left her with the color code of a white jumpsuit. Hey Himiko, Izuku returns her smile with a much smaller one. His is very reserved, displaying no teeth. It doesn't reach his eyes, where in such a lit space, hold no light of their own. The smile does, however, crease close enough to the bags beneath his eyes. He sounds as tired as he looks. Disheveled clothes hang from his body. A coat that's much too baggy. A shirt larger than his torso. Sweatpants. It makes Himiko simultaneously sad and feel better about her own state of appearance when seeing him this way. The girl's eyes twinkle under the room's lighting. I wasn't expecting to see you again any time soon. That glint begins to glisten even brighter when she leans forward. What brings you by? Izuku holds his breath, attributing to the fact that his eyes by comparison are that of a dead fish. When he exhales, it's a silent sigh. The boy's mood goes down with the tilt of his head. I wanted to see an old friend. Ah, Himiko notes the bittersweet attitude he has towards her as an old friend. She also notes the pair of red shoes he has on and the memory that comes with them. You know, you were my first friend, before Tomura or the others. Izuku's head raises just enough for him to look at her with his blank expression. She smiles in an effort to get him to smile too. That's why I helped you. And it works, if at least a little and merely momentarily. Izuku's small smile fades when he asks her, would you help me again? Himiko glances around her empty cell. Kinda hard to do from in here. She can't help but giggle at her own joke while gesturing towards the barrier between them. Izuku hums, nodding. I'll be honest. You wouldn't exactly be free to roam around but, he wrings his hands together while trying to think of what to say and how to say it. The commission is merging with public safety and being run by better people now that I think they'd be willing to give you a fair deal if you agreed to work with us. He decides to just come right out and say it like it is. Himiko's face forms into a frown. He thinks that maybe he should have tried sugarcoating it a little. But then she shocks him. Her face softens, and as does his by extension seeing her appear so tender towards him again after so long. Aren't you tired of being controlled? The question Himiko asks Izuku in return to his unspoken own to join him makes the boy physically recoil. He's so taken aback that he sits up straight in his seat. For a while, the room seems dark despite the artificial light within it. Izuku is lost in a daze. Himiko doesn't realize how close to home her question hit. The boy is baffled beyond belief, his empty stare falling to rest on his chest. The string dangling from his heart is stagnant like his life currently and he's not sure how to get it to start again. Himiko takes his silence as a sign to continue. That's why I wound up with the League. They and Staney were all about being free and they're all gone, but Izuku snaps back to attention when he hears his former enemies mentioned. Himiko stares at him with wide eyes. It's her turn to be taken aback. You were picked up and brought here before it all went south but, Izuku swallows as he recalls recent events, a lot of people died. Himiko holds her wide-eyed stare a second longer. And then she settles, shoulders slouching with the rest of her body's posture. I expected that. Her calm demeanor leaves a lingering inquisitiveness in Izuku's gaze that makes her elaborate. Death, I mean, she s her head at him, didn't you? Izuku blinks, averting his stare to the ground and then the ceiling before bringing it back to Himiko. Weirdly, no, he's surprised with his own answer more than Himiko is. The blonde smiles softly at the green-haired boy as she says, "You haven't changed a bit." And for some reason unknown to her, that makes Izuku mad at himself. He clenches his hands into fists on his lap as he replies earnestly, "I know." Himiko uncrosses her legs, using them with her hands to push herself up from the floor. "Why do you want my help? What do you even need me for if everything is already taken care of?" The girl approaches the glass wall once she's standing. Izuku is almost hesitant to answer. But he forces himself to. There's been a lot of revelation lately about the nature of quirks and their relation to contracts with devils that, he sees Himiko during his explanation and stops short. "Yeah, you probably don't have a clue what the hell I'm talking about." He has to remind himself that she's been cut off from the outside world for a while. Himiko shrugs. "I was called a devil, a demon, all sorts of stuff as a kid for liking blood." The nonchalance has an undertone cutting edge to it as she asks, "Is that what you're getting at?" Izuku wants to protest but actually takes a moment to consider it. Maybe. He doesn't waste time pausing though and is quick to add, "But not the way that you'd think." Himiko stares at him like he gained a quirk that gives him two heads. "We're still trying to figure it all out." Izuku slumps a bit. Himiko huffs, turning away. "If they just wanna experiment on me then." "No, it's nothing like that." Izuku stands up to stop her as though there's no glass in between and preventing him from chasing the girl. Himiko stops, but doesn't turn back to fully face him quite yet. "What are you really here for?" Izuku opens his mouth to answer but nothing comes out. "I don't know." He falls back into the chair behind him and hangs his head. "Like I said, you lost everyone and I lost everyone, my friends, and the defeated form of what was once a rambunctious hero catches Himiko's eyes. You only came back to me because all you've got left is me." She folds her arms under her bust and shakes her head. "I don't wanna only be your second choice. It's not like that." Izuku holds up his hands to show her he's being genuine. She looks past his palms and at his face where she can better see the truth of him. "I honestly didn't even think we'd ever run into one another again since we were kids." Izuku's eyes water just a tiny bit. Himiko has to blink to stop her own tear ducts from acting up. She so desperately wants to accept that, but she first needs to ask. Are you happy that we did?" Izuku pushes aside their fight and instead looks at the girl in front of him here and now. She looks a lot like the kid he was able to confide in when he had nobody else to. "Yeah, I'm glad that we did." He stands up again in order to approach the glass wall. "Okay then." Himiko places her hand against the clear barrier as Izuku does so that they inadvertently touch. "Tell me all about what happened." She meets his stare. "Start from the beginning." Izuku's gaze hardens. And then it softens. He starts with his mother's disease. He talks about his contract with Pokita and the basis of his dreams towards becoming a hero. He tells her how he was able to gain everything he didn't have when he was quirkless just to have it all ripped away, and how that the entire time it was a plan manufactured by Makima. She listens to him tell her that everyone he knew and loved was all for the sole purpose of being taken away in order to break the contract that he was bound to make. Was I not a part of that? She feels a little heartbroken to not feel included. Which is as silly and funny as it is disturbing to them both. But Izuku finds himself considering an alternative purpose to Himiko's inclusion in his life as a factor that wasn't part of Makima's plan. "I think you were without Makima knowing, and that may even be part of why I'm still here today." Somehow subconsciously, he thinks about how he nearly lost himself along with everyone else. He thought he had no reason to keep living. But there's more people in his life that he cares for than Makima thought to manipulate or murder. There's his sensei, Aizawa. There's Mirio. And there is Himiko. But that's besides the point, cause she's gone now and it's finally over. Himiko looks like she wants to speak on the matter more but withholds herself. She instead asks, "Are you not going to be a hero anymore then?" Izuku flinches. He actually flinches. That makes him laugh a bit internally. Things are complicated out there. The boy scratches his mess of green hair while trying to break it down for Himiko. Isn't a thing. Hero society in general is just about over even if it were. He shrugs, "But I was a part of the commission and so I'm part of public safety, I guess." Himiko can see why he's choosing to stay with them now that he's put it that way. She can understand why he was so mad at himself for being the same as he was when it comes to his thinking. He still wants to be a hero. Himiko starts to wonder, there's still villains without heroes. Izuku starts to nod but stops in order to explain it better. Well, there's this group that's surfaced, and they're all about the Age of Devils since they were so adamant about the Age of Quirks before that. He procures a book that's been getting absorbed by the masses like the next Bible. They want an abolition of the restrictions that have been doubling down since they view it as a means of oppression. Himiko skims the surface of the book that Izuku shows her about a club called the Liberation Front. After being ridiculed for her quirk all her life and called a devil, and now to have some genuine form of basis behind it that's now being celebrated, Himiko has no chance of hiding her grin from Izuku. Sounds like my kinda group. I figured you'd say that. Izuku smiles sadly at her while putting the book down. But you don't know what I'm talking about with devils and contracts. He starts to pace back and forth, the root of quirks and how humans are able to do any of what we can do. Izuku throws her a glance that makes her jump. Quirkless people like myself. I had no contract until finding Pokita, and that's how she finds herself listening intently to him. Contracts can be written to be generational and applied to bloodlines or family. Izuku stops pacing. I guess that's why some quirks are stronger or weaker than others. Why would that change my mind? Himiko squints at her old friend as an attempt to better see what the heck he's talking about. Because, honestly, part of her wants to be convinced by it. You ask me if I'm tired of being controlled. Izuku's eyes narrow when he stares back at her, aren't you? A metallic egress comprised of two sliding blast doors opens, the parting of steel allowing Izuku to exit Himiko's cell. Turrets mounted to the ceiling alongside video cameras track the boy as he steps through a metal detector and full-body scanner. Waiting for him at the end of the security check are his comrades. His former sensei, Aizawa, and his former senpai, Mirio. Aizawa keeps his usual garb of a capture weapon scarf and full-body suit despite the recession in hero work lately. Mirio, on the other hand, is downdressed with a polo and jeans. Well, Aizawa's tired eyes loll back with his head as he leans against the wall behind him. Mirio elbows Aizawa in the side with just enough force to make the man shut up while rubbing the now sore spot. How did it go? All Might's successor places a hand on Izuku's shoulder. The form of contact is surely meant to be soothing, but the cool touch of a robotic prosthetic has the opposite effect, especially when Izuku feels partially responsible for Mirio having lost that hand. Izuku is contemplative about his interaction. A fond smile forms on his face despite his answer, the same. So no luck then, Aizawa drawls. I wouldn't say that. Izuku shrugs before proceeding forward into the prison's corridor. Mirio walks with him, keeping his prosthetic hand stationary on Izuku's shoulder all the while. So long as there's hope, he gives the shoulder a small squeeze. That's what we're all about now. Izuku keeps his smile on his face as he gives his allies a glance. Aizawa has fallen into sync with their walk. The underground hero sips from a flask, having taken up drinking after the crisis he endured. Some of the alcohol leaks through the schooling on his cheek. He has to wipe it with the back of his hand to stop it from dribbling past his chin. Mirio grins as he jokingly suggests, I don't suppose we should put a giant chainsaw head on the public safety building now. Don't get any ideas, which only earns an eye roll from Izuku and Aizawa having another sip from his flask. The last thing we need is for them to start a church about me or something. The trio step onto a lift that will raise them up above sea level and out from the cell system of Tartarus. I don't think your other candidate's suggestion would appreciate that much. Aizawa side-eyes Izuku as he asks, are you sure she's going to be receptive? About as sure as I was about Himiko. Izuku heaves a heavy sigh as he thinks about the task ahead of him. The idea to assemble a team and the act of actually putting one together are entirely different. But picking up reserves from Class 1B, people we know wanted to be heroes and still might want to do some good, she's our best bet considering I spent the most time with her. He gives each of his current allies another look. Mirio gives Izuku an encouraging thumbs up. Then let's go recruit Obara Shiozaki. A smog-smothered sky swallows the city outside Yotsubashi's office window. Below that, is all that he's built set ablaze. He stands suspended above it in his ivory tower and yet he can feel the intense heat radiating against the glass until it becomes unbearably blinding. Smoke wafts through air ducts, the ventilation intoxicating the very air that he breathes. Yotsubashi runs a hand through his hair, a flamboyant orange like the fire consuming his life's work, and his father's, grandfather's, lineage of life's work. The pinstriped suit he wears is as dark as the ash hitting the window that's beginning to melt from amber flakes pelting against it. Detenarit is destroyed. The cult following he had accumulated dwelled in this makeshift city, and now they're burning for their sin. The books that his company mass-produced are undoubtedly charred with the devoted readers. If this is hell risen to consume the devil propaganda, then he can see the irony in it all. That doesn't make this any easier of a pill to swallow though. Yotsubashi turns away from the window. There's no point overlooking things if he's unable to see something sensible within the violence. Rather, he sets his sights on the elevator that serves as the singular entry and exit to the top of the tower here. Chikazoku, Yotsubashi's lieutenant, steps out of the lift. He's typically not without a laptop or some type of touchpad for his abnormally long fingers to type on, but this time, he comes bare. The man's long length of hair swishes with his frantic movements when he rushes forward. He's panicking. Destro. We're losing. Chikazoku clasps his hands together as though he's praying for some miracle to save them. We must flee before it's too late. Ever the skeptic one, Yotsubashi tugs at the tie, twisting the collar around his neck. It's suffocating in this room. He wants out of it just as much as his lieutenant. Even if it means jeopardizing all that he's done under the mantle of Destro to achieve what is now to be lost. You're right though, Yotsubashi waves for Chikazoku to follow him. We've lost this battle and we must leave if we are to win the war. Chikazoku does a double take, blocking the elevator. So you're admitting defeat? The shout makes Yotsubashi stop abruptly. Yes, Yotsubashi growls through gritted teeth. He tries keeping his stress under control as to not lose control of his quirk. That'd merely make more of a mess. Now move. We have to go before the chainsaw crew reaches us. But something stops Yotsubashi a second time. A sharp stabbing pain in his side. He looks down, seeing that Chikazoku has stuck a knife in him. The traitor's head is as lopsided as his grin as he says, "That's all that I wanted to hear." And then it makes sense why someone so devoted to Destro's cause would betray it. The man melts. Himiko Toga stands in Chikazoku's place. And by the way, we're already here. The blonde girl gleefully reveals that she's slipped past Detenarit security somehow. No. Yotsubashi tries retaliating with his quirk. But it's too late. Himiko carves and cleaves with her weapon like she's gripping the handle of a chainsaw and not a knife. Destro is split in half. There's no fanning the flames. Not even the updrafts from Mirio's punches are enough to fully extinguish the fire. And yet, Getten continues to plow through with ice to shower soot. The two duel in a flux of cold or superheated air. Mirio maneuvers to shatter an ice wall. He could phase through it all and end things quicker, but the brute force of powerhousing it appears apparent when faced with a foe so fixated on proving their own strength. Mirio's mechanized arm, now having been upgraded, transforms into a motorized chainsaw. Courtesy of David Shield, a retired All Might called in such a favor for the inventor to keep catering to public safety. The chainsaw drills through ice and is about to carve a bigger pocket in Getten's parka. But Mirio pulls back, phasing through Getten instead. When Mirio comes out the other side, he uses the support item's voice activation to shift it back into its other gear setting. Fire Punch, the command also serves as an announcement for his finishing move. The metal fist burns as bright as Endeavor's flames did when reaching their critical point. Mirio is in part to blame for half of the fire destroying the city. The other half is undoubtedly thanks to his comrades. Flames flare up along the street, a fiery runway pathing way for two enemies to oppose each other. Each of them have lilac hair that lifts with the rising temperature. One of which has blue skin that reflects the counterance of orange light surrounding her. She smirks whilst sauntering towards the boy ahead of her. How about an interview? I'm sure you have a lot you want to say. The boy smiles back, but hides that grin with a mechanized mouthpiece before she can see it. Shinso is handling the West Wing. Aizawa gives his binding cloth a good tug to ensure the liberation groupies he caught are secure in the restraining wrap. That means we need to wrap things up here. Shiozaki snares some stragglers with her vines, matching her comrade's moveset. We're meeting with the others at the center then, she asks. Aizawa nods, same plan. Nothing's changed. The ground quakes, losing structural integrity beneath it. The city topples and sinks. Fractured flooring flows from Yoshindo, the earthquake emitter cackling all the while. Above him hovers Inasa Yoarashi, the wind current curling to suffocate the flames within their area so that they don't get consumed in them. He snaps his fingers, the blowback snuffing out the fire fragments. Their combined effort closes off the escape of any remaining Liberation members, which results in a natural Earth-shaped cell. The pit contains them. The battle ends before it begins. And the tower that once stood so proud of them all falls last. Falling with it comes Himiko Toga, the girl joyously laughing as she hoists a giant hammer over her head. Yoarashi uses his control of the air to slow her descent that she doesn't break her legs. And she instead breaks a bad guy below her, squashing them with her massive mallet. Mirio arrives at that moment, high-fiving Himiko. The two blondes strike a pose while exclaiming, "Power!" Aizawa rolls his eyes, too tired to join the rambunctious youth. Abara shakes her head, young but much too reserved to be a part of it either. Not bad for the chainsaw crew without the actual chainsaw man leading it, right? Shindo cracks his neck while stretching side to side. Vibrating at such a frequency really rattles his body that he tends to rotate his shoulders by the end of every mission. Where is Suzu anyway? I wanna see him. Himiko hops over to Aizawa. She almost wraps him in a hug but he dodges it with a simple side step. Midoriya is stationed in America. Aizawa pulls out his flask since he can tell this is the type of conversation that'll require alcohol in his system. That's why it's our job to keep things tidy here. PSH, Shinso announces his arrival with a matching demeanor to Aizawa's. Following behind him like a zombie or a puppet under his brainwashing control is the woman with blue skin. But Shindo has a point. What kinda team are we without our leader? Come on, guys, we still have Aizawa as our interim leader. Mirio tries boosting the team's morale when he sees them starting to question their situation. Aizawa, appearing as a drunken homeless man, doesn't bode much confidence though. He takes a sip from his flask. A long sip. Shinso scoffs. In Chainsaw Man, wailings of hemorrhaging material chases her as she runs. In America, where skyscraper structures serve as signals for sound waves to bounce from, that cacophony carries far and wide. It descends from the sky with debris, reminding her of the echo when her former home came crumbling down. Streaks of fire light the streets ablaze when raining down. Others run with her, the pitter-patter of people's feet nearly trampling her when she trips. Eri winces as she clutches the spot of her now scraped knee. Fresh blood oozes from where skin has ripped. The young girl looks up and around her, scanning the passing panicking crowd for a face of familiarity. Melissa, she calls out for the woman that was supposed to share lunch with her. But Melissa likely won't hear her over the scream of steel skyscrapers collapsing. Other people stumble when the ground quakes. Eri is unable to get back to her feet for that same reason. The asphalt trembles beneath her. Those rumbles rattling her to her core are an increasing reminder of when she left the Yakuza tunnels. She wasn't aware that the surface was just as hectic as below, but now she sees what towers over her and the buildings of America. A small speck clad in blue and white climbs what skyscrapers remain standing. A colossal creature takes swipes at it, destroying the beams that the small being crawls from. Eri is certain that whoever dares clash with the must be a hero like the ones who rescued her from the Yakuza, and yet, this feels different from that time. Everybody is fleeing from the battle rather than putting their trust in the hero. Everyone except for a green-haired man. A giant villain. Eri watches this person push past everybody to get a closer look at what's causing so much destruction. People brush against the fellow's shoulders, decking him roughly, but he only shifts his body for them to pass. As the guy gets closer to her, the girl's eyes widen with a reflection of recognition in them. The man tugs at the tie rope around his neck until it comes undone before getting at the buttons on his white dress shirt. While civilians scramble to leave Eri behind, Izuku Midoriya moves in the direction of danger to stand protectively in front of her. Why-yo? Eri's lips quiver as she looks up at Izuku rather than the colossal creature. He glances behind himself to give her an assuring smile. The sun illuminates his head like a halo as she exclaims her guardian angel's Idini, your chainsaw man. Izuku grabs at the cord dangling from his now exposed chest. Come on, Pokita. His eyes shift from Eri to where his hand closes into a fist over his heart. With a single finger looped through the small handle of his starter string, he gives it a good tug. Let's cut this guy down to size. Chainsaw Man revs to life. Chainsaw Man saves the day once again. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.